Now, Richard Marles. This story has gone from bad to worse, and it is getting weirder by the hour. As you know, the Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister has been the focus of the reporting of news.com.au and their political person Samantha Maiden, and we've echoed it here because the frequent free flyer Marles has been enjoying an awful lot of private jets, including plenty when he should have been taking commercial flights, but no, those of course dropped him off, not at the Melbourne airport, but the one close to him at Avalon Airport. For much of this week, he's been able to slide by with knowing that the opposition's only going to ask one question because there's so many other things to get to, and I'll get to Qatar and all of those issues in a second. But Richard Marles is unrepentant. He's unrepentant because he doesn't talk about the VIP anymore, the VIP service that's available to people like himself, that flew in from the party activity of the Labor Party conference in Brisbane to the Matildas in Sydney back to the Labor Party conference. Remember, if this had been Defence Minister Peter Dutton and it was the Liberal Party conference, we'd still be talking about it on the hour every hour. But because it's the new broom, the new car smell, nobody wants to upset that. Well, unbelievably, we learned today via the reporting of Tom Connell that the Deputy Prime Minister wants to up his security. He wants to move now towards 24/7 security, and not because there is any identifiable threat to his life. Now, obviously, he deserves the right to be safe, and previous ministers have had 24/7 because there have been threats against his life, but I'm not aware of any of them that exist currently for the Deputy Prime Minister. Instead, the reason that this is taking place is because a reporter interrupted his jogging efforts. Ridiculous. This, in part, is the response of the reporter who interrupted his efforts and the one who has been putting him under the pressure about the free flights.
Now, the incident was not seen as a threat to the Deputy Prime Minister. It's hardly unusual for a journalist to approach an MP, but a security assessment will look at all aspects of his current arrangements. In the wake of reporting on his professional and personal routines, Mr Marles has security for some events, but does not have permanent security. Mr Marles doesn't need an AFP detail to protect himself from scrutiny. He just needs to get his office to answer questions from journalists and to release the details of his $3.6 million in flights, a practice that has worked just fine for 50 years.
Now, normally I'd set off the Catherine wheel and start yelling about how ridiculous this is, but I want to remain as calm as possible, because this is yet another example of the reality of the Albanese government, the one that promised to be oh so transparent but finds ways to block itself off. It is ridiculous that the Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister now pretends that he needs 24/7 security because he was interrupted by a reporter who was asking questions of him, but his office would not answer them. So when she saw the opportunity to talk to him, one of the joys of this country is that we don't have Secret Service that would get in the way and push you out of the way if you asked questions of elected officials. Now, I have no doubt in the next couple of days we will start to get the deep backgrounding that has been to most of the press gallery, which has meant they have not engaged with the frequent free flyer and the scandal that is his use of the private jets. And I'm sure that there will be some suggestion that there have been personal threats. If there have been, then obviously 24/7 security becomes an option. But right now we're not aware of them. Instead, apparently one of the reasons why 24/7 security is necessary is because of the reporting and discussion in part of programs like this that have talked about the fact that so many of these flights that he's been taking have been deliberately being rerouted to an airport that's closer to his home. Now, before Media Watch decides to turn this into the defence of Richard Marles, as they probably will on Monday night, at no point have I even told you anywhere even remotely near, and none has Samantha Maiden's reporting, about where he lives. That would be grossly irresponsible to say, here's the street, here's the suburb. That would be irresponsible. But when you're the member for Corio and you know that that's near Geelong, and Geelong is closer to Avalon Airport, that is a completely reasonable assumption to make about the movements of the Defence Minister. But apparently the need for 24/7 is because all of this scrutiny about where he is and where he's been going starts to provide a pattern for people who may want to attack him. Well, the reality is that politicians of all stripes fly around this country. They'll fly from the airport nearest to their house, or in his case, the one that's even closer than the one that's nearest to his house because it's more convenient, and he doesn't take the commercial flight. Instead, he ends up taking millions of dollars worth of these private flights. But it speaks again to the culture of this government. It was a joke when Anthony Albanese tried to set up as one of the other reasons why you had to vote for him was one, vote for us because we'll do something about cost of living. Instead, everything costs more. And the second is vote for us because we'll be more squeaky clean and transparent. We won't be like every government in the past that the second they get their backsides onto the powerful positions, they close the door behind them and they tell you, sorry, you can't know anything because of national security. Remember?
A more honest and transparent government going forward. We will make it transparent. We're being transparent. We will operate in a transparent way. I want to change the way that politics operates in this country. We need to have transparency in the process.
Now, just because you say a lie long enough does not mean that it becomes the truth. You may well be able to tell a lie enough times to convince people to vote for you at an election. But once people work out that it is a lie, the likelihood of them returning to you at a next election, and there always is a next election, well, it becomes a whole lot harder. I want you to think about what we have detailed on this program for weeks and weeks and weeks, months and months, almost from day one of this administration. You can't know who's on our planes. You can't know why I chose to fly on the planes. There are thousands, literally thousands of questions on notice in the Senate that they haven't answered. About 90% I should say, of the documents that are supposed to be handed over to the Senate haven't been handed over to the Senate. If you want to find out about the Prime Minister's diary, that'll cost you $1,300 to ask, and even then they won't hand over the information. When it comes to the decision-making in and around everything from Qatar to you name it, no, you can't know about it. The Australian people demand openness from the people who we entrust to run our country. Because if the assumption is we won't tell you, then our assumption is you don't want to tell us for a reason. Now, I have no information to suggest what those reasons why they won't tell us are. But if the cumulative effect that we have now learnt of the Albanese government is your job is to shut up and pay your taxes, while the dollar that you earn is worth less than it has been in a generation, while you are paying off interest rates that are higher than they have been in a generation, while you are in a personal recession but the government is getting more revenue than ever before, then that is not what Australia signs up to.